Imagine your joy living in a world in which you could deploy your investment capital, or for that matter, your creativity, your energy, your skills, in a way that not only produced a financial gain, but also a social, environmental, or even spiritual gain. Imagine your elation at investing directly in companies, again, either as an investor or with your entrepreneurial know-how, where you'd not only see a financial reward, but you'd also contribute to caring for the planet, treating suppliers justly, blessing customers, creating well-compensated and dignifying jobs that strengthen families as they prosper, and in some cases providing a way out of slavery or the trap of human trafficking. We call this impact investing. And today we're considering a particular subset of the impact investing domain known as business as mission, or BAM, whose practitioners are driven by their faith, see business intrinsically as a calling, and seek to build and operate businesses that simultaneously are making the multiple bottom line impacts I've mentioned. At this point, let me acknowledge that my co-hosts and I are really grateful that we have such a diverse audience and a diverse client base with correspondingly diverse values. And so we know that some here talk of impact investing and scratch their heads. Wait, what? Others are excited by the thought of impact investing generally, but hear talk of being faith-driven and again, scratch their heads. We understand that. But whatever your starting point in this conversation, we hope you'll give this episode a close listen nonetheless. Here's why. To help us explore this topic today, we invited Buddy Rathmell to join us. As you'll hear, Buddy is a doer. Buddy felt called to move to Thailand, and so he did. Once there, he felt called to combat human trafficking, and so he launched and for 11 years ran an organization based in Thailand called Stop Slavery. Later, he felt called to train young entrepreneurs in BAM, and so he started action learning-based training programs as well as a podcast, the BAM School podcast. You're about to learn a lot from Buddy, and you'll be inspired by his story. You'll learn more about what BAM is, how to get engaged with it, what some of the risks are, what some of the financial returns are. You'll hear examples of such BAM businesses, including successes and failures. And you'll hear about the businesses even now he's looking to buy and operate to underwrite the tuition for the young BAM entrepreneurs he hopes to train. And if you listen to the end, you'll hear the backstory to this 3-time All-American soccer player's senior year, in which in the final moments of the national championship game, with his jaw wired shut no less, he unleashed a shot on goal. Did his kick find its mark? Did they win? Stay tuned for all that and more right now on the Retirement Lifestyle Show.
Welcome to the Retirement Lifestyle Show. I'm your co-host, Roshan Loungani, here as always with Erik Olson and Adrian Nicholson. Today we have an excellent episode for you. I'm really excited about it. We've got a special guest. Buddy Rathmell is joining us. He has had a very interesting life, traveled the globe as a child in an army. He hitchhiked across the United States for his first semester of high school, attended Bible college where he was a 3-time All-American in soccer and won the national championship his senior year with his jaw wired shut. Spent 3 years in corporate America in Scranton, Pennsylvania, 10 years doing youth ministry on an Air Force base in Japan, and 11 years in Thailand as the founder of Stop Slavery. Over the past 7 years, his focus has been business as mission. He is a trainer for BAM training and does coaching as well. He loves helping others fulfill their God-given dreams. Currently, Buddy is launching BAM School and is in the process of buying a mature, profitable business to fund a disciple-making movement through business. And we're lucky to have him today because he is a friend of Erik's. So, Erik, can you first tell us a little bit about how you know Buddy? And then I'd love to focus, Buddy, on learning more about you.
Yeah, sure. So Buddy, the first time I ran into you was at the BAM Conference USA in the Bay Area in October of 2019. And you were one of the organizers and one of the hosts and MCs for that event. And so I got to know you through that a bit, but really got to know you a lot better when you led the BAM training part 1 for a week in Amsterdam. And so I had flown to Amsterdam to get that training in business as mission, or BAM. And you were one of the 4 faculty, or really, I guess 3 or 4 faculty there that really just poured into us. I learned so much from you. And I just thought it was an amazing, amazing time, but also got to know you as well, not just through the context of the teacher-student relationship, but also just got to see your heart for people and your heart for the cause. So I was really glad when we kept bumping into each other at some more BAM events like the BAM Global Congress lately. And so, here we are.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Really excited to be here. Really fun to get to know you, Erik. I actually had Erik recently on my podcast because of our experience together in Amsterdam. But yeah, excited to be on the podcast with you guys.
Well, actually, Buddy,
Great.
You mentioned the podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about that and where to find it, what it's called?
Yeah. So you actually have to search for BAM, which is my website, forbam.com. But the podcast is the BAM School podcast. And I'm just using it as a way to interview people that I want to learn from and connect with potential investors.
Excellent. So
the website is number 4, BAM.com.
Correct.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Excellent.
And we'll have all that in the show notes so that people can find that there as
Great.
well.
So let's start by asking you, can you tell us a little bit about business as mission, or BAM?
Sure. So the movement has definitely been evolving. I mean, there's always been people that are interested in using business for good, going back to Guinness, where it was like, hey, let's create a drink that can sustain people and not like hard liquor where people are just getting drunk, or people that have been thinking, how do we use business in a way that helps others? The BAM movement as it is now kind of started with ways to get to other parts of the world where they were using business as the tool to get in the country. And so sometimes it was kind of like fake business, like they just wanted a visa to get into countries that are closed to missionaries or whatever. Some people like the Jesuits and Moravians have been using some form of business to further the Christian message around the world for hundreds of years. But currently, as it exists today, people are starting to be aware that they need to have, in fact, the tagline that we use for BAM training is real business, real mission. It has to be a real business that's profitable, that is providing a service and return on that it's it's not a fake business, which I think in the early BAM movement there were a lot of those. So that's kind of where the movement is today.
Can you give us an example of some of the businesses?
Sure. So I mean there are thousands of BAM businesses around the world. There's one in my town in Chiang Mai, Thailand, that I consult with, and it's called Expat Homes. And their website is homeinchiangmai.com. But they seek to minister to their staff and to expats that are coming into Chiang Mai, Thailand. And they've been there for about 6 or 7 years. And my wife and I have been consulting with them, pretty well since before the start. And now the founder has left and the next couple has left. But now there's two other couples, American couples, that are running it. They have about 8 employees, and they did get investors to start, but it was more investors that were they were going to get their principal back, not really, focused on getting a return on that investment. But there's huge ones. There are BAM businesses doing tens or 20 million in revenue a year that are, even larger. A lot of those are in countries where manufacturing is really big, and maybe they don't put on their tagline that they're a BAM business because of the countries that they operate in. But there is an increasing amount of larger businesses titling themselves as a business as mission business that are kind of growing in the world. A lot, it was a lot of coffee shops and handicrafts and that kind of thing. And now we're seeing all kinds of real businesses around the globe.
Yeah, that's awesome, Buddy. And how did you, I'm sure our listeners would want to know, and kind of backtracking this a little bit, how did you originally start or get involved with BAM? Was there kind of a moment or someone that you met or connected with, or just research when you were really starting to get involved and really pushing yourself in this direction of BAM?
So for me, as a kid, I was interested in business. In 2003, I was on a prayer retreat on the Pacific Ocean in Japan, and just felt like God said, invest in Christ-centered entrepreneurs. So it's been a journey since then. And I was, I did some consulting starting in the late 90s. And then I got trained as a leadership coach and a Berkman consultant, always kept up on business stuff. I moved to Thailand to do anti-human trafficking work in 2011, thinking that I was pausing my business journey for 5 years. But one of my best friends became Mark Plummer. He and his wife have, they're kind of like heads in the global BAM movement. He owns bamtraining.org, businessesmission.com. And so I did an event that he was doing, the same one Erik went to. I did it in 2011. And in 2013, I started doing training for them. And so that it just kind of, I fell into the training piece, loved helping, entrepreneurs that were focused on business's mission. And so, started doing MCs and some keynotes for Mark and the training events. And then out of that just came coaching from people seeing me at those events. And in 2015, I actually tried to start a couple of my own BAM businesses, crashed and burned, and learned a lot from that. So since then, been really focused on how do we do real business? How do we make this effective, profitable, all those kind of things. So that's a bit of my journey to BAM.
Yeah, that's great. And especially all the traveling you've done, all over the globe, just meeting so many people and learning from so many businesses. I'm sure you picked up such a comprehensive view of the world when it comes to business and implementing that value aspect, that impact aspect of it. I think is really great and really interesting. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably helpful if we backtrack a little bit further just to get some context for this, because for those of our listeners who are regular listeners, this already. But if this is one of the first episodes, or you're just sort of discovering the show now, we have been of the many, many topics that we have discussed. We have had 2 previous episodes on a category of investing that we would call values-based investing. And the first of those 2 was on a category known by various labels, but sometimes sustainable investing or socially responsible investing, or ESG, meaning environmental, social, and governance-based investing. So we did one subject on that. We've also done one on faith-based, or what sometimes is called biblically responsible investing. But both of those focused mostly on publicly traded securities. So in avoiding some companies, embracing others, engaging with the leadership of still others to try to have a values component infused into that. Everything from combating apartheid to human trafficking and to gambling and adult entertainment and pornography and things of that kind. So today's episode, when we invited Buddy, we were also thinking about a third category of this values-based investing approach that has seemed important to us, which is known as broadly impact investing. So impact investing can, again, be driven by a variety of possible values bases, but in general, what it looks like is saying we're going to invest more directly than in the publicly traded securities, where you're for the most part making your money when you buy that or invest in such and such a company is really just going to the person who previously owned the stock. In this case, you're investing more often in private companies, either through a debt offering or through an equity offering, where the goal is multiple bottom lines. And so for some, that bottom line might be a social outcome to alleviate poverty or to, something of that kind. Another might be an environmental goal. Still another might be, of course, there has to be a financial bottom line, but still another might be a financial bottom line. So, and when we talk about business's mission, Buddy, we're talking about something that typically these days is philosophically driven by these multiple bottom lines, right? And so what, in that sense, how would you see this as connected to the broader story of impact investing, and how would you say that it differs from it?
So we, at first when I was in the BAM world, they talk about the quadruple bottom line of people, profits, planet, and purpose. And at first I was like, I care about the planet, but I'm not going to make that, a bottom line of my business. But I've kind of come around on that and gone, okay, let's make this an issue. Of course, we know the science behind the people piece of a business is huge. Businesses with a healthy culture are 3 times as profitable as businesses without a healthy culture. And there's tons of studies done on that. And equally, the science behind purpose. If you know that you are in a purpose-driven company, they're actually more profitable in general than companies that, they're not focused on their purpose. And we've seen companies actually that, like Tom's Shoes, that have grown almost 100% because of their purpose, and have become profitable in that way. As it differs from the rest of impact investing, I think, one of the things, like you said, is often sometimes people are thinking of them as overseas, outside of like their home country, maybe. I tend to think of it as, wherever we're doing business. The other thing is they are often smaller companies where maybe you actually know the founder personally or the team personally, or you're connected with them in a way. Maybe you're using your skills from a distance to help the business in some way. If you're skilled in finances, you're helping them with that, or marketing or whatever. And so I have a friend who raises a lot of money out of Oklahoma City. And one of the things that he said is he's finding that his investors now want to be involved in ways besides just giving their money. And they're willing to actually take a lower ORI. Maybe they're used to 12%, and they might take 8% on a debt investment because they know the business is making a difference. And so they're excited to be involved in that way. I think it's a way, one of the really cool things is that it's a way for people to be involved in ways more than just growing their capital.
Mm-hmm. So you're actually, that answer, Buddy, is sort of leading me into what was going to be my next question. So just again, by way of background, we have a very diverse audience, and they certainly don't necessarily all share the same investment aims or the same values, which we appreciate. We're glad that there are a lot of different people who find value in what we're doing with this show. And that's also true not only with their values, but also with their perspectives on faith. So with that said, then what would you say, why should people see BAM as important, business's mission important? And specifically, what kinds of people would you say would most value BAM and deploying capital toward that?
I could just follow up on what Erik was talking about, just the aspect of it's not just investment anymore. It's about having sometimes your values and your assets and how you distribute your capital to be extremely important. So can you kind of go over those steps on why that would be something people look for in BAM?
Sure. I think people are drawn in general, in the BAM movement, they are drawn to it by the purpose behind it. Whether it is people and elevating people out of poverty, providing, training for people. There's a number of businesses that were really successful in Cambodia in the last 10 years where they were providing people skills for people. So you'd have managers come in that were willing to work, for lower pay. Maybe they're used to making 10 grand a month, and they come there and they work for 2,500 a month because every day they know they're helping this person grow in a different way. And people also would invest in those businesses and then visit them. I think that's one of the cool things of being able to actually visit, see the difference that it's making. Diggity Coconuts has, they help people by providing for the people that are farming in their coconut farms, and they're thinking through how that's making a difference for those people. I missed the second part of Erik's question. If either of you guys got that.
Well, so you're not hearing me, is that right?
I didn't at the end of your question.
Okay, all right. Well, that's great. So whatever the technology is. So with the different sorts of perspectives that our listener base has, what would you say who are going to be the sorts of people that are going to be naturally drawn toward a business's mission type of investing as a subset of overall impact investing?
I think, it heavily sways Christian at this point, just because that's the group that's kind of been pushing it forward. There's definitely people of faith of some sort. I think that it's appealing to that broad spectrum. There are also people that just like I'm approaching some people now whose values are a little bit different than mine overall, but they know and believe in me and what I do. And so a lot of times you'll have that where people have a relationship with someone, and so they want to invest with them because they believe in the person. And then there's just people that go, I want to make the world a better place through my investing. So I think, that would be the top three that I've seen.
Well, that's interesting you say that, because I know when I went to the BAM Global Congress recently, one of the stories there was through Thrive Coffee. Did you hear their story at all? Okay, well, I'll give you the nutshell then, because I was going to ask you to tell it. But essentially what they've done is they have raised and put a fixed price in for coffee for their growers, and it's much higher than even the fair trade price. And as a result, these farmers now have a level of stability financially that they've never had before. But also what's happened for these farmers is that their level of physical quality of life has just improved so much. And so it's just been an enormous blessing to these farmers to be able to do that. And retailers here in the United States, when they heard the story of Thrive Coffee, said, well, absolutely. And so started putting Thrive Coffee on the shelves. Now, that's not an endorsement for Thrive Coffee. I can't say, I think I've had one bag of it and I really enjoyed it, but they're not sponsors. We have no reason to particularly advance Thrive Coffee, but still, I just thought that was a great example. So I think a lot of our listeners, whether or not they're necessarily dialed in on the same sort of outlook about faith questions, certainly I think would look at that and say, that's fantastic. Let's do more of that. There was also a woman from Indonesia, and this one I didn't hear her name, distracted honestly a little bit during the conference at that point, but she was talking about how they were taking women who had formerly been in the sex trades in Indonesia and providing them with a way to essentially start a new life for themselves, which I thought was also a really powerful story.
It's so cool, the things that you can do with business. Erik, you and I ate at a restaurant in Amsterdam that is staffed by people who've come out of the sex trade. And they didn't advertise that at all. It's not part of their marketing. It's just who they are and what they do. And they're successful because they do great business. But for the, we had connections with investors in that business, and that's how we got into it, to see kind of the backstory. But business is just such a great tool to make a positive difference in the world. And that can be overseas where you can make huge differences. There was a guy with David Skews, who had a consulting company on safety consulting on construction projects, where in Cambodia, at least about 10 years ago, the average high rise would have about 2 deaths per floor. And, you have 100-story skyscrapers. Wow. Well, maybe they're not 100, but 80-story skyscrapers in Phnom Penh. It's 160 people on that. And way back in the day in America, when the Golden Gate Bridge was built, that engineer said, we're going to put a net under this bridge, and saved, I think, 19 lives while he was doing that. And OSHA wasn't around. They weren't telling him to do it. He was just like, I'm going to think about how I do my business. I just connected with a business owner in Goshen, Indiana. And he his minimum, or the minimum salary for any of his employees is $55,000 for full-time employees, and minimum hourly wage is $25 an hour. He just announced that in May. And he said, and I'm not trying to pay my employees less. I'm hoping to pay them more in the future. Like, this is the bottom and we're going up. And so anywhere in the world, if you're thinking, like we say, thinking biblically about your business, you're going to be concerned about those 4 bottom lines. Without profit, you're not in business. Without taking care of your people, you're not as profitable as you could be, and you're not doing business as well as you could be. And without thinking about the planet, like, you're losing resources that you have around you. And then, of course, purpose just makes it fun to get up in the morning and go to work, and it makes it fun for investors to be a part of it. It makes it fun for your customers to buy your product and use your service or whatever.
So, Buddy, as a podcast that features, as you can well understand, a lot of investment talk, we also want to talk about the risks. So when you think about BAM investing from the vantage point now of the investor, not so much the entrepreneur, and I'd like to come back to the entrepreneurial side in just a little bit, but when we think about it from the vantage point of the investor, what are some of the risks of BAM investing that are unique to it that that aren't necessarily, we recognize risk in all other forms of business investing, but what are some unique risks that are inherent in BAM investing?
Sure. So, I think one of the main reasons my business didn't fly in Cambodia was I was trying to do things with integrity, by the book. I told my lawyer, I'm not going to run 2 sets of books. I'm not going to take money under the table. And so in doing that, I didn't know this when I started, just the differences of operating in different countries. Because of my classification as an entertainment business, 30% of my gross off the top went to taxes. And then if there was profit on the backside, that was taxed additionally. And so my lawyer was like, well, if you change and say you're an eating establishment, we can drop that 10%. And I was like, no, this is going to be tough, but I'm going to do it. And so, just not understanding the difference of rules and regulations in different countries. When people ask me now, hey, I'm interested in starting a business in Thailand, what should I do? And I say, go to a different country. It's just really difficult. I'm starting a business here in America, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this country is amazing. I love it. It's like, I can't even tell you how much easier doing business is in America than it is in Cambodia or Thailand. And so there's risks associated with that. People operating in countries where they actually get kicked out and can't go back to their business. We know a guy that, Eric, you met a guy on the last conference who had a business in a country that during COVID pushed, the boundaries tighter for Christians being allowed in that country. And so he's not able to go back to his business. That's a pretty big risk when you can't get back to it. Thankfully, he's trained up people that are doing well and continuing to run the business. I think you have, there's sometimes there's things where you have knowledge from one country, you can bring it to another and you can grow that country in that place. Sometimes that's an advantage. Not understanding the nuances of a country can be a disadvantage. Not understanding, cultural differences, days off, a lot of countries have double the days off of America, and that just hurts productivity. Or, they don't necessarily have the same work ethic that we're used to in America. And so how do you work around that? One of the things that I ended up having to do for my own sanity in Thailand was hire an assistant. I was doing some construction projects, and I just had to say, listen, you schedule the construction people, you wait for them for 2 hours. I'll pay you a couple bucks an hour, or, $3 an hour. I think I was paying this assistant with a college degree to sit there and wait for them, because if I think that they say we're going to be there at 1 and they show up at 3, I'm frustrated. But so that was just a difference of like, okay, I had to hire somebody to sit there so that I don't get frustrated in doing this construction project, So.
Well, I lived in China for a couple of years, and now it's been a bit, and I'm sure things have developed substantially since then. But it was at least, I think, comparable from the standpoint of an early stage or an environment where maybe the rules of the road for business were a little bit less developed at that time. And yeah, it was those people that were trying to run businesses were facing a lot of obstacles and had to do a lot of learning and had to be very careful. And so what you're saying doesn't surprise me.
And it's just business anywhere, right? Like one of my friends had a business in China. The Trump tariffs hit. They went from massive profits to no profits overnight, and it was just like, that's business, right? Regulations change in America and boom, you've got to pivot or you're dead. So, but I think you probably have a few more of those in if you're operating overseas.
Well, let me,
so
I'm sorry, can I just interrupt that? So, as Erik mentioned, we have a lot of different audience members, and as the Retirement Lifestyle Show, one of the areas I am interested in is the investing side. Erik, you mentioned the risk, but so the first thing, if this is something I want to invest in, Buddy, where do I go to even find BAM investment opportunities?
Yeah. So there's a couple places. IBEX has been successful in investing around the world. They're not a huge fund, but in the millions. A lot of it is just asking and networking. I think the very best place you can go is to come to me and invest in one of the projects that we're doing. I'm saying that kind of tongue in cheek, but I am actually in the middle of raising funds to buy a business in America that is the purpose of which is to fund a business adventure and mission school where we provide a free education. Kids can be scholarshiped in, kids 18 to 30, that can be scholarshiped in and grow and learn and actually get real world hands-on business experience while traveling to 9 countries in Europe and 20 or 25 states and meeting a lot of different entrepreneurs. I think, there's BAM Global is a website that would put you in touch with them and depending on what type of business you're looking at, like I think it's still grassroots and niche. And so talking to people that are in the field, myself, Erik, Mark Plummer of bamtraining.org, David Skews has done a lot of investing himself in BAM businesses over the last 20 years and often knows, businesses that are looking for capital at any given time.
So
yeah,
go ahead, Erik.
Well, I was just also going to say there's a few other networks, fortunately, that are also rising up. I know that faith-driven investor.org has now got a marketplace, which is featuring more of these. And then there's paralleling the Shark Tank, which everybody's familiar with Shark Tank, that show on NBC, I think it is, where people come in and they make these pitches for their businesses. And then, the sharks decide whether they will or they won't. There are comparable events around the country known as the Lion's Den, where prospective entrepreneurs go in and they make their pitch and potentially can gather capital there. So if an investor has an interest in doing that, they can go hear the stories of these companies directly straight from the founders in these pitch meetings.
Yeah, and also Sovereign's Capital is another one that you can invest in.
Interesting. So you mentioned your business, Buddy, that you were starting. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? You started off, it's scholarships to students. Where is it? All over the country, specific schools? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I actually am I'm buying mature, profitable businesses. My first one is a EBITDA of about $500,000. The next one will be, this floor will be about $1 million in profits a year. And then what we're doing out of that is a percentage of the profits are going to run these schools. And we're starting with the first one in Roanoke, Virginia. Hopefully we're moving to other cities annually where we're opening, buying new business or new to us businesses and opening new schools. And so within that model, there's money to pay someone to run it, and to have a cohort of about 10 students a year. And the goal is to turn out some of those students where we're actually kind of a Chick-fil-A model, where when you're a Chick-fil-A operator, you only have to pay 10 grand. You go through training, and if they say yes, you pay 10 grand and you have a Chick-fil-A that you're running. But you also don't get all of the profits. Chick-fil-A keeps those. And so we'll be keeping some of the profits. The entrepreneur will have the opportunity to make, a good bit of money, but we're also going to be keeping part of that back to be funding a school that they'll be running. So it's an innovative model. I'm really excited about it. It's still in theory. We're just starting the first one this fall. So I'll check back with you guys in a year, and we'll be looking for more investors to buy our next business.
Well, Buddy, let me ask, if I'm an investor in this and I'm interested, am I a donor and donating to this business, or what type of return do I get?
Yeah. So it's debt investment. And right now we're doing 10% a year at 1, 2, and 3 year terms. And mostly simple interest, but also if people want to do it for 3 years, we're willing to compound the interest for 3 years. So on a 10,000 investment, that looks like getting back, I think it's $13,310 after 3 years. So it's they're stable companies. So we're looking in kind of boring niches, equipment rental, sign companies, paving companies, just things that have been around for 50 years and that are probably going to be around for another 50. They also have, a lot lower multiples than tech. So you don't have the same potential of we're going to 10X this investment or whatever in an equity investment. But it's a pretty solid, the SBA says loans, of $1 million and above to buy an existing business have a 98% payback rate. So it's a pretty solid investment in that sense.
Mm-hmm. It should be good enough to pay the investors their 10% and keep the school running.
Yeah. And we probably will, first priority is pay the investors. Second priority is fund the students. And then the third is to, fund an operator in it that's going to be a little bit, concerned about the business and run the school as well, where the part that they'll be concerned about the business is helping with marketing. So even though the students, they're going to work in the afternoon for this particular business, so it's not just a drain, they're also doing marketing in exchange for their scholarship so that we can continue to grow those individual businesses.
So, Buddy, with we talked about some of the risks. You've begun to talk about some of the investor returns for the businesses that you're buying, and thinking about the BAM businesses more broadly. What are the potential returns of those? I know sometimes we talk about them as market. Some businesses offering market competitive market returns. And then we talk about others offering concessionary returns, and each investor kind of has to decide whether the other bottom lines that are being achieved there, the environmental or social or spiritual bottom lines, as well as the financial bottom lines, are valuable enough to them to accept some concessionary rate on the return on their capital. But generally speaking, in terms of what you've seen from various businesses, what is the range of returns, including losing all your capital? Which is certainly one. But what's the range of returns on these sorts of investments? At least the ones that you've seen and understood their financial models.
So we actually, even though my business failed, we actually did provide a 10% return on investment to investors. And some of them said, hey, we understand what you're going through. Just give me back my principal and we won't worry about, the interest. I would say in general, it's definitely less. There's definitely a minority of businesses that are providing market returns in the BAM field. A lot of them have said, we want to give you some capital to get started, and just at some point we would like that principal back. I think more you're starting to see some sort of return on investment, whether it's a debt offering. I think debt offerings are a little bit more common in, in the BAM world than equity offerings, but you are starting to see, if you hit some of the resources that we mentioned earlier, you're starting to see some that are offering equity return on investment in those different areas. But I would say in general, it's going to be less just because it's a less mature market, and there, you're operating, like we said, in different countries with different risks and different things that don't necessarily allow for the same ROI that you might get on a tech business in America.
And I know that each deal's a little bit different, but how much of a concession is typical? Like, is it more typical for someone to give you the money and just expect their principal back, or is it more typical to get somewhere between that and the 10% you're offering?
I would say for the smaller ones, it's often more typical just that people are giving the principal and they're hoping to get that back. They're getting started from friends and family. A lot of those, maybe it's $100,000 or less that they need total. I think as you get to be a bigger business, you start to see more, the business model maybe is a little bit more mature, or it's been proven already. And you start to see, bigger needs maybe for expansion. And so then, the returns can be a little bit bigger. Of course, with an equity investment, I had a friend who had a number of cafes throughout Asia in different countries. And when he started, he was so far ahead of the competition coming from North America that he just was killing it and brought on investors to expand just when Starbucks and all these other companies decided to expand in Southeast Asia, and ended up losing the company to the largest investor and just having to walk away. Whereas if they had stopped without the investor money, they would have been okay. And the investor was an active investor from the start. And I think the investor has done okay. And they kind of did want to be involved, but it wasn't as profitable as the investor was hoping. And they ended up selling off some of the ones that weren't, countries that weren't performing as well, and consolidating around the ones that were. But yeah, I think that you're going to see, lower returns on investment for specifically the bottom line of profit.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, there's another, we've touched on this, and your own story embodies it, Buddy, and that is the entrepreneurial opportunity. So I'm guessing that it's a minority of our audience has this desire to get out there and be an entrepreneur in this way, but you don't want to rule that out. And so for those people who are thinking, I don't want to just deploy my financial capital, I want to deploy my human capital as an entrepreneur. What's the on-ramp to learning for people to learn more about doing that?
Yeah. So I think, the best way for that is some sort of relationship. If you already have a connection with someone, that's a great way to get started. The other thing, I think if you just post out to your network, people are so connected in today's world. If you just said, hey, I have been involved in X industry for the last 20 years. Does anyone know how I could use this and make a difference? There's probably a way to do that. And there's probably someone within your network, that knows how to do that. I think, looking at some of the kind of the same resources that we've talked about, there's actually a guy in Wisconsin that's trying to figure out a platform for exactly that. How can experienced, not necessarily entrepreneurs, but just maybe some form of business, or we kind of talk about entrepreneurs as the 10%, but then the business builders, everyone that goes around it, the accountants, the marketers, the managers, all of those things. There's a huge need for business builders, maybe even more so than entrepreneurs themselves, where you have some skill. An entrepreneur is like going at it in some country, but they have a need for some of these other areas, and maybe they can't afford somebody full time And it is hard. Like, it's hard managing, if you want to volunteer and you're like, I want to give 2 hours a week. Well, that's really hard. What tends to benefit a business is, maybe coming for a chunk of time or going, you know what, I'm about to retire. I wouldn't mind spending 10 hours making a difference, 10 hours a week, making a difference in this thing. Just the, like, I want to give a little bit, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours a month. You're often not that much of a benefit to the entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I live in Zeeland, Michigan, and I'm surrounded by businesses that I would characterize in, maybe loosely, but I would characterize them as values-driven businesses for sure, and maybe BAM businesses more broadly. One of the industries that's really prominent here is the furniture manufacturing industry, and one of those is Herman Miller. And so they're the story of Herman Miller and that company, which got its start in the early part of the 20th century, is a really fascinating story. I won't tell the whole thing, but just bits and pieces of it. One of the sons-in-law, I think, of the founder Herman Miller was named Max Dupree, and he eventually took over. I think he was the son-in-law. Maybe he was just an early hire. But in any case, Max passed away just a few years ago. So there's this connection with the past. But Max drove this company in such a way that, among other things, he said he would cap his own income at a certain multiple of the lowest paid person in his company. And so that was part of his ethic, if you will, which was in terms of the social side, the social bottom line, was wanting to ensure that it provided a good living for all of the people that were coming to be part of this project together. And I look at those sorts of things. There's another company around here called Innotech. They're a light industrial manufacturer, and what they're doing is very focused on sustainability in terms of their business, as well as on poverty alleviation. And also they've started a school. They're just trying to say, how can we use the profits of this business to do something more than enrich ourselves or our investors? How can we do something that's making a difference in society in a way? I think they would all have said that was, in their view, driven by a faith perspective. But anyway, fascinating just to see. It doesn't necessarily need to be overseas, that somebody's doing something that has these multiple bottom lines, and allows people a way to plug in. Another thought, just observation about our client base: many of them are enormously talented and skilled people, and they've spent years and years cultivating and developing these skills. And so now they possess a deep base of human capital themselves, where the one way that they could be involved is in coaching for coaching entrepreneurs about just the basics of success in one or another technical aspect of what they're doing, as well as, in some cases, some of those are entrepreneurs. So I think that, are you seeing many people, what I would call recent retirees or sort of near retirees, that are sort of stepping in and volunteering their know-how as a coach?
I've seen some of it. I think more people want to do that than actually do it. It's like, oh, when I retire, I'm going to do this, but man, it's really fun to spend summer at the lake with the grandkids. What I think, honestly, what I've seen a number of times is people exiting a company in their 40s or 50s and then going, I'm too young to just do this. Let me get involved in some way. I think that, or people, for whatever reason, retiring early, and then they're able to focus on the impact with their life. I would love to partner with someone who's at that stage, who's exited a company, and would be able to provide some of that, 10 hours a week involved in kind of the mentoring. Like, one of the things that I found in interviewing a lot of entrepreneurs is, I feel like the older an entrepreneur gets, the more they're focused on principles. Like Ray Dalio, came out with a book that's called Principles. And this was at the end of his time of basically running Bridgewater. but younger people tend to really be focused, I think, a lot on tactics and strategy and how do we make this happen and what do we do here and how do we get on YouTube and, you know, make this bigger. And I think what, you know, tactics and strategy are changing and you can find them on YouTube. But some of the principles is, I think, gained over the course of a lifetime is what is really needed in a lot of businesses and specifically BAM businesses. So yeah, if any of your listeners were interested, they could reach out to me and I could definitely put them in the direction of something, hopefully that would match what their passions are and what the needs are in the BAM world.
Well, great. Thank you, Buddy.
Yeah, that sounds like a great offer for anyone out there that can help. It like you said, that has been a successful entrepreneur and is looking for a way to give back. There's a great opportunity there.
Well, I don't have any more questions. Do Roshan or Adrian, do you have more that you wanted to pose?
Well, I guess one other question you may have answered, but what other ways are there to get involved? You mentioned the entrepreneurs, people donating a few hours of their time with their expertise, investing. Are there other ways people can get involved?
Yeah. So, you know, like one of the things that we're trying to do is build a network of people that are successful, have expertise, you know, have walked with integrity, to connect them individually to like students going through our school. The other thing is just, you know, we're going to be traveling to meet business builders and entrepreneurs. So if someone says, hey, if you're stopping through, you know, my town, let me know. And so I've already connected with a bunch of people to say, hey, we'd love to come through, and, you know, or authors, you know, to say, hey, I'm going to have all my students read your book. They'll read it and then we'll come and we'll interview you for a few hours. I think if people are willing to travel and give a couple weeks, you know, a month at some other place in the world, there's a lot of businesses overseas that could use that help in some form or fashion. I think like if you just said, I want to come alongside, you know, a younger entrepreneur, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the BAM world, but just there, maybe, you know, last night I was at a church gathering and there was a 21-year-old that was interested in starting a fund. And so I ended up having dinner with him, talking to him. And I said, hey, I'm reading this book called Backable. When I'm finished with it, do you want? And so that was just in a gathering, and I was able to connect with him, help him, and start to forge a relationship. So I think if you're looking for purpose, it will come to you, you know, like you will see it around you. But I think the best, you know, throw on LinkedIn, hey, I'm looking to make a difference in a business. Do you know of any opportunities? I think one of the hard things is, as successful people, we sometimes feel weird about making the ask, right? Like throwing that out there. Well, I could get rejected in that. And if you offer to help people, sometimes people aren't mature to know that they need your help, or that, you know, they don't want it, or they do reject it, or whatever. So I would just say, just do it. Offer it out there, see where things settle. You know, even, have a coach help you to get into that place, you know, hire a coach that says, hey, let's walk through this. We'll help you get to this place where you're creating a sense of purpose. You know, I think the halftime, I forget the author's name, Bob Buford, I believe, you know, that whole idea in the last 15 years of like, okay, what am I going to do with the second half that is really about purpose? You know, it's just inevitable that we're striving hard in our younger years. And sometimes we realize, oh, I've missed a bit of the purpose along the way. And so just reorienting life around things that are going to, you know, whether it's your faith and you want to be more involved in that, purpose and helping others. I think it's just a matter of making the decision and doing it, like, you know, like so many other things in business or investing. Probably a lot of people talk to you about, I know I need to make an investment, but you know, and they don't do it. And you're sitting there going, man, you're losing money with it sitting in the bank. Come talk to us. and we can help you grow your wealth. And I kind of feel the same with purpose of like, man, don't just sit on the sidelines and waste the talent that God has given to you. Talk to someone, deploy that in a way that's going to make a difference in the world. And you'll be eternally grateful that you did. You'll very rarely does somebody invest intentionally in a person and go, wasn't worth it. It's like, there's joy that comes from that.
Yeah, it definitely does. You mentioned the purpose, but I think at all stages of life, investing in others and helping others will bring you joy.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, Buddy, I want to say, first of all, just one last thing, and that you are one of the most determined readers that I know. I mean, you're always coming up with book references and just constantly digesting new ideas. So I really admire that about you, and can retrieve those ideas. It's like a computer disk, and then bring those into a conversation. So that's really great. I also want to just say that for our listeners, I want to point you to Buddy's podcast again. So that's the BAM School podcast with Buddy Rathmell, and you can track that down and hear other people's really interesting stories about what they're doing. And also, if you have an interest in what Buddy's got going on the investment side, and you can certainly reach out to him directly and have that conversation with him. It sounds like I will just say that one of the things that we have found is that, there's some really sexy businesses out there sometimes, and the returns can be pretty phenomenal, but bread and butter businesses, the ones that you often overlook, sometimes just have really strong, stable cash flows. And so, that I think you're pretty clever there, Buddy, for going after businesses of that kind, just really stable, slow and steady money generators all the time.
Thanks,
and I just want to mention one, just in closing, we mentioned this at the beginning, but the website is the number 4 BAM, 4BAM.com. And on the upper right, if you click on episodes, you get episodes of Buddy's podcasts. And from May 19th of 2021, you can listen to and hear all about Erik if you haven't had enough of him this week or any other week on the Retirement Lifestyle Show.
Yeah.
So get more Erik on the BAM podcast from May 19th. And Buddy, I just want to say thank you very much for joining us. The one question I wanted to ask you was if you enjoyed working at Dunder Mifflin for those 3 years.
Yeah.
For the Office fans.
So it was in Scranton. It was called R.R. Donnelly and Sons, but we called it The Office and the Warehouse. They were in book distribution. Yes. And I did enjoy it. It was a lot of fun, and great introduction to corporate America for sure.
So were you Jim or Dwight when you were at
of course I'd like to say I was Jim, but probably a bit more Dwight at the time.
Hey, so Buddy, there is one other story in that mix that I wanted to understand, which was the human trafficking thing. I mean, so say more about that. Oh, actually, I also wanted to know why you had your jaw wired shut when you were in the national championship.
Yeah, quickly on the jaw. A guy broke it for me playing soccer. I didn't even ask him to. He just did that for me as part of the game.
Volunteer.
And so I missed the last of the season, and in the national championship game, we were winning 3-1 with about 7 or 8 minutes to go. And the two assistant coaches, I dressed, but my jaw was wired shut. I can't really run or breathe. And with about 3 or 4 minutes to go, coach said, "Okay, buddy, get in the game." And I run in, and I'm just, haven't played soccer in 6 weeks and just running around, and I get wide open in front of the goal and end up scoring the final goal in this championship game, which was just, it was super fun. I think one of the top 10 moments in my life, but the human trafficking. In 2009, July 4th, I heard about human trafficking, sex trafficking in particular. And so I began to pray about it and was like, God, you got to stop this, end it. And I felt like God was just like, well, why don't you do something? So we started Stop Slavery, picked up our family, moved to Thailand, and specifically worked with police and investigators to kind of bolster their ability to investigate. We brought in equipment and button cameras and like watch cameras and just different things to help them. It's come so far since then. I only did it for about 5 years, and then I handed it off to younger investigators. But super rewarding, super hard at times. There was a lady in our neighborhood who we knew was trafficking, and we were never able to get any evidence on video. That was difficult, but we ended up, one of the biggest things that we did, I didn't even want to do it, honestly, was bring in equipment from America that was used for the word is gone, terrorism. And we use the same software and technology, and it can read cell phones and computers and all those kind of things. And the Thai police ended up using it to get about 150 arrest warrants. About 92 people were arrested before it started to get too high up into the country. And unfortunately, the lead investigator had to flee to Australia. But 92 people were arrested for a huge trafficking ring. And so it's really rewarding now to go, man, it has come so far in the last 10 years since we have been involved with it. And we're actually moving out. We have a couple people still involved in that, but other organizations have grown up. They're bigger, they're better, they're more well-funded, and they're kind of taken over. So we're happy to kind of bow out of that and let, other people come in.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Excellent. Well, Buddy, thanks again. We really enjoyed you joining us. And as I mentioned earlier, the number 4 BAM is the website to reach out to you. And this has been another episode of the Retirement Lifestyle Show. To all of our listeners, thanks for joining us again. Please give us 5 stars, like, subscribe, tell your friends and family about us, and we will be back to you next week.